Welcome, you patriots of America. Get out your pen. Get ready to write down this link, please. All right? So this is Sergeant Dave Matthews of the Remember the Fallen show on klrnradio.net in beautiful Seminole County, USA on the Winter Springs Oviedo line. So I want to write down this link. It is klrnradio.net/show/remember-the-fallen. That's the link for the show. So you need to get that going. And you need to share this. This is a really important show. So today's podcast, we interrupt our normal scheduled show for this tragic breaking news of the human remains found in a shallow Texas grave were positively identified as Army Specialist Vanessa Guillen on Sunday, according Guillen family attorney Natalie Kawam. Guillen, 20, had been missing since April and was last seen in the parking lot of her barracks at Fort Hood on April 22nd. According to the U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Command, her remains were found June 30th. Guillen was bludgeoned to death with a hammer in the armory room where she worked. Her body was transported from the military installation by her killer. Kawaham said, citing details the family learned during a meeting with Army investigators Thursday. Quaham told CNN on Sunday that Guillen couldn't be identified by her medical records because her face had been beaten so badly. Her remains had to be sent to Dover Air Force Base in Delaware to be identified. The murder of Army Specialist Vanessa Guillen is horrifying. There can be no excuse or rationalization for the killing of Specialist Guillen and the circumstances surrounding this tragedy. Which brings us to our special guest. We have Lynn Geyser, who is a veteran service officer at Disabled American Veterans Organization, in which I am a lifetime member, and she also is the woman coordinator at the DAV Department of Florida. I see Lynn as an expert when it comes to women's challenges in the military. And our next guest is Kia Baker, who has her own very own podcast called the Female Veterans Podcast. Look that one up. Google that. And she works at London Rail Academy and was a former hospitalman at United States Navy. So as you can see, we have some very well qualified women to discuss justice for Vanessa Guillen. I welcome both of you to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Great for having you both as well. All right, I would like to start off with Lynn from the DAV. Lynn, for the first question, indistinctively, veterans were able to help other veterans. Now, let's take that a little bit further, and I can say with experience that women unequivocally are able to help other women. So with that being said, is it safe to say that there are not enough women in leadership roles in today's modern-day warfare to keep up and monitor these type of sexual harassment allegations? Would you say that they can't move in quickly enough on the victim's defense?
I would agree to that. The other thing, there's so many different perspectives of that, though, because you have the status of women are just going into the military, and there's more that are signing up for it and getting higher ranks. And we're looking at seeing more mentorship. But then you also have the negative side of it, where you are seeing the higher up, some of the higher up rank that have to listen to the chain of command. And when they get up higher, an MST occurs or a troubled soldier occurs, then there's a debate between if it's a mentorship or if it's really the chain of command failure.
I do a lot of organization stuff, even with the VFW. Mentorship really starts with trust and respect. And when you lose that trust and respect, that's when that mentorship goes out the window. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, on a daily basis. I work under, I'm running a nonprofit, and through that nonprofit, we see on a daily basis, especially about 75 to 80% of our women have been sexually assaulted within the military, and through that process, it is a major trust issue. Trust issue with the system, trust issue while they're in the military, and they're really, really skeptical in coming out, and it's very, very hard for them to even reach out to us, except for the one-on-one mentorship that we work with through the programs that I help run.
Yeah, because there's so much stigma, right? Because once you mention something like that, you become ostracized. And the murder of Army Specialist Vanessa Guillen is horrifying. There can be no excuse or rationalization for the killing of Specialist Guillen and the circumstances surrounding this tragedy. It's just because of the way the military handling these sexual harassment cases. So, we're here to just discuss on ways to hopefully to resolve it. I know this one podcast is not going to resolve it. It's going to be a long process. So, Kia, what kind of question would you have for Lynn at this time? So I'm going to hand over the mic to you, Kia.
Absolutely. Lynn, how do you feel about the call to shut down Fort Hood? I mean, after 5 murders in less than a year and a trafficking ring being busted there, something is clearly wrong at that base. What do you feel about that?
Well, in the long run, a lot of people are angry, and you see it day in and day out on groups and female other locations. And what the overall effect is, Fort Hood has a problem. We know that. We see the action. We see the suicides. We see the murders. We see all that stuff. So there's something going on. I believe even if you're shutting down it's not just Fort Hood, though. See, that's the problem where we're not seeing is there's so many different forts that have still suicide and killings in their throughout the states. It's not just Fort Hood, so it's more systematic. It's not just, and so I don't know. That's kind of a yes/no question. It would be there are people that believe that we should shut it down to the point, but that's going to be a very big goal and a very over decades. This is over decades that women have been struggling or MST has occurred. I mean, look at decades when we first, as women, we become nurses in 1960s, 1970s. They didn't even accept us back then. So we're still fighting to this day, and it's just getting worse, in my opinion. So that's a questionable. I don't know. In my opinion, I don't think the shutting of Fort Hood would be the answer. I think we have to look outside the system. I think if they call it the FBI or I don't know the system itself, but I believe there needs to be an outside provider, outside connections where we can go to, where if we have troubles that we can report and that comes in.
I agree. I think that it is important that a deep investigation occur at Fort Hood. I'd actually really like to see the base shut down until that is completed and a complete overhaul of leadership takes place. Mm-hmm. I think that's very necessary there in order to get justice for Vanessa, because not one more woman should lose her life while she's serving her country at her base where she's supposed to be surrounded by people that have her back.
You know what? One thing, Kia, that really, really irks me, and this is a really sad story of having, Vanessa, and it had to come down to her family coming into it. And we see this a lot. Like you say, there's a couple suicides, a couple killings at Fort Hood already, to the point where it wasn't reported. It's a year later, and you still didn't find the body. We find it now because we're fighting Vanessa. And so it's because of the family, this is how we're finding out. And this is the sad part. The other sad part that I think about is that these soldiers that are in the military that are dealing with the situation with Vanessa, what I'm hearing is there was a secret or something went down or whatever the case may be. I don't know the whole story. But I do know that in the military, we are supposed to have each other's back. We are supposed to respect each other. We are supposed to trust each other. If you go to war today, in that circumstance, I would not, I wouldn't go with that person who killed Vanessa Guillen. So, what is this military coming to?
What is it, a male slogan? The male bondage, I got you 6. Why aren't we taking the most fragile? One of the most fragile would be the women, it's a little bit more fragile than the men, I would think, a little bit. You would think that we'd be watching their back even more, that I got your six, That's a term that's made a lot with the men. I don't hear that with the women, and it's sad. It's sad that we don't see a lot of that with the women.
And we just, like we say, Dave and Kia, we just had a circumstance, and I won't name names, but we just had a circumstance where the situation came down to somebody reported, like somebody was on Facebook, and I won't say names because it's but it was a lieutenant colonel who said something that women are in a good old boys club where we should just deal with it. We have to be part of this team, and if it's a bad behaviors, we have to be part of that. To me, that doesn't make sense.
Absolutely not. It's a horrifying thing to see another woman support that kind of behavior because it's a quote-unquote good old boys club. I think that's the kind of mentality that makes it difficult for people like Vanessa to want to come forward and report. What do you think, Dave?
Well, I think that saying should have went out with the 80s, with the 80s music, because, that's old school. I mean, even that saying, the good old boy network, that's gone. It should be gone, So that's the cigar smoking club, right? With all the higher uppers, they go through their special little officers club, and they have their sexual harassment jokes, and they keep harassing without having any kind of punishment or anything. And so, so I myself served 15 years as a puppy in the Army National Guard. That's what we called puppies. But I did 2 years of Title 10, which is active. So I got a feel for both sides of the Army. And when I went to PLDC, Primary Leadership Development course at Hanscom Air Force Base, Army Regulation 600-100 came up a lot. It was instilled into our brains as non-commissioned officers, NCOs, and it reads, Army Reg 600-100, Army Professional Leadership Policy states, quote, trust is the bedrock of our profession, end quote. With this national case for justice for Vanessa Guillen, do you feel there will be a harsher penalty for soldiers, but not only that, but more of a background check prior to the youth of sexual harassment allegations to where the soldier breaks this so-called bedrock of trust? Because obviously this is like a chem-light battery, which is a joke in the military. It has happened too often now that it needs to go up to the five-sided puzzle palace, which is the Pentagon, before there's another one of these FUBAs, which is Foxtrot up. Foxtrot stands for the F-bomb, beyond all repair, especially when these male soldiers keep on violating women in their ranks with the military sexual trauma, which brings on post-traumatic stress disorder and rape cases for the lower-ranking female soldier. So because in the end, there's a price to pay, right, ladies? With a 30 to 50% disability claim, right? So if you do the math on all of these numbers, because in the end, it's going to cost the military millions of dollars in the long run. So, Lynn, that is what it's going to take to hurt the Veterans Affairs in the wallet. So basically, it's like a lawsuit that pays out till the soldier dies. So let's magnify these scenarios. There were 6,676 sexual assault reports involved service members, victims in fiscal year 2018, right? So let's do the math. Usually the female is young of age and low ranking, and the majority discharge would say, and women live longer than men, which is a fact we know. She lives to 85, so gets out at 25. Let's just say this as an easy scenario. So 60 years of collecting a disability check every month until she dies. So let's average, let's say for easy math, $1,000 a month for 60 years, and the total is for Uncle Sam, the U.S. taxpayer, $720,000 for one violated female soldier, which is a little inflated with the producer price index. Now, exponentially, by over 6,000 of these allegations a year, we could build the Space Force with that money. So these fugazis in the military keep rearing their ugly head. Every generation, we have this going on. Like, for instance, Agent Orange. We know what happened to Agent Orange, right? Now we're seeing the consequences of that football bat. Now, most recently, burn pits. Every soldier who goes overseas, right, has a protective mask at the bottom of their duffel bag. Do you think someone in leadership would have sound off and say, hey, if you're near 5 clicks from a burn pit, don your mask? You see, this is personal for me because that's what my MOS was, right? I serviced and collaborated over 100 protective masks before my unit left to go to Afghanistan. So with that, taking them 50 years for compensation, that's going to come up, right? So like anything else, we keep on kicking the can down the proverbial road, which signifies nothing but postponement, but in the end, with the taxpayer footing the bill. Made that, all they had to do was, even a private no class could have made that order to don your mask when you're in a near a burn pit, All right, so I'm done with that, Mike. I'm going to get off my soapbox, but I just had to get that off my chest. So where were we, Lynn, on that question?
I think when you said all this, and great statistics, because, is it overtime, and that's 2018, and look at today, it's 2020 now, and the statistics are now coming out, the NST is coming out, PTSD is coming out. Well, PTSD was not diagnosed until 2015, I believe, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
So it's just a new, it used to be adjustment disorder or shell shock, depending on what era you were. But I think one thing that kind of puts it into perspective is that the other thing that kind of, when you said that, with the initiative and how high it's going and the money we're spending, the other factor that I've seen, and this is where it came down as a personal perspective, because this is what I had to encounter, is that when you're in the military, and you say when they join the military, they should do a better background check or mental health or whatever the case may be, they're struggling to this day. This has been decades. They're struggling to get people in.
Right.
So, there's a factor there too. Is okay? Are they being more lenient? The mental health. The mental health could come from the PTSD in the future, or being in Iraq a couple times, or whatever status they. Why did this person do what he did to Vanessa? And he's in the military. He's supposed to trust. He's supposed to respect. He's supposed to honor. And this is where the status that I'm having a hard time with. When I was in the military, the 3 key factors that came across my table, because I encountered the sexual assault. I'm a survivor today, but I encountered the sexual assault. I encountered the lack of trust in my unit. I encountered the higher authority I don't want to say going against me, but it's when it came down to a trouble soldier, and I was a good, honorable soldier for almost 4 years, honorably discharged and everything. Prior to that, all of a sudden, 1 year, and I'm a troubled soldier. They didn't look at my mental health. They didn't look at, and this is throughout the soldier. This is throughout the military. They didn't look at anything. They didn't care who I was. They didn't even know I had a child. Right. So it was more of a personal perspective. Again, it's those 3 factors: the trust in the unit, like you say, got your 6. If I cringe to that word, because in my unit at the time of the status that happened, they didn't have my 6, and to this day, 15 years later, I struggle with that still.
There's another story happened to a woman, that veteran, because she had PTSD, and because she wasn't actually a combat veteran, when she went to go get a service dog, one of the questions was on their application, were you in combat? And because she wasn't in actual combat, the organization wasn't going to give her a service dog, even though she had MST, all right, and she had other cases of sexual harassment, but she had PTSD over it, and it had proven in records. But the service dog company, the one thing on the application is that you have to be in combat to get a service dog, which I thought was so wrong. It took her 12 organizations, to finally get her service dog.
I went through a private one myself. I have a service dog myself, and it has helped me tremendously myself as a PTSD, because I had it to the point I was agoraphobia for over a year, and I wouldn't go out of my house. So I know how important it is for PTSD women, especially women, with service dogs, because it is the attentive. The dog is your best friend. You don't trust anybody else.
Right.
So it is a big factor of helping healing and recovery. So I believe in that piece of it. But I know Kia has a lot of experience working with women veterans, And because she's done a lot of podcasts on her Women Veteran podcast, I'd love to hear a little bit more on her perspective.
Well, I will tell you first that service animals are so beneficial for veterans who are suffering. And I agree with Dave that just because you are not a combat veteran does not mean that you are somehow less. So one of the things that I do on the Female Veterans podcast is I interview all female veterans, whether you were in combat or you weren't. And the stories that I hear there, we tell are good and bad stories, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to preface what I'm about to say with that. However, a lot of the stories that come to me are of sexual harassment, misogyny, MST, and even stalking. And it is an alarming amount of women who experience this, and equally as alarming is the amount of women who fear retribution so they don't report.
Correct.
And then these women live, like Dave said, for a long time, and they have to recover from these wounds for sometimes 20, 30 years in order to have some type of life that is fulfilling. And now when you think about going into the military at 19, 18, 20 years old, and within a year being assaulted, and then having to spend the rest of your life healing that wound and releasing the shame that does not belong to you in order to have a thriving life, it's infuriating to me.
Yes.
It never gets easier to hear, but we have to share them and bring awareness.
And Kia, I love your perspective on that. And I think going back to the Vanessa piece on how they first started saying that there was a sexual assault with the bathroom incident and a couple others, and then they changed it to because they found her bones, and unfortunately a sad circumstance, and we were all hoping that she was going to be alive and well, but in the circumstance, it sounded like they just dismissed the sexual assault, like, well, that wasn't even part of it. I mean, it's like a blank slate. It's like, well, let's move to the next spot, instead of, the sexual assault had nothing to do with this piece. Well, in a sense, in my opinion, it did, because that's where the trust factor came in. That's where she was hiding. That's why she didn't want to report. And it might have been more than just the sexual assault, but it's sad that you cannot report to your people that you're supposed to fall over your higher authorities, and they're supposed to have your back. They're supposed to be leading the lower rank, because they're the ones that's supposed to lead by example. And we're seeing a lot of that, suicide, killings. I mean, even a year to 2 years ago, the captain shot herself in the vehicle. I can't remember the whole story, but it was just sad because she was sexually assaulted. She couldn't tell anybody.
The male end, the leadership and the males, they are saying that they're coming out, and the leadership are explaining that they have PTSD now. So they are going to mental health, the higher up leadership, but they're not going to move forward with the sexual harassment case. I think that's next in line, because now we finally have the leadership going to mental health, realizing they have a PTSD problem, and they're telling their soldiers to go to mental health if you have any challenges at home, any finance problems, because when you go to war, those challenges amplify in the war setting. So, and it just keeps amplifying when you take it home and you transition back. So finally, leadership is telling their soldiers, go to mental health. It's going to be okay. So that's going in the right direction. Now this case, this national case, we're hoping this is going to be the spear that's going to change things around. Like maybe shut down Fort Hood. I think that's a great idea, Kia. Shut it down for 60 days, 90 days, wherever long it takes. Let those people fail without having a job. And maybe that will change. Or maybe women in the military should protest. All the recruitment aid offices should stop recruiting female soldiers at this time. Just stop completely. Someone should spearhead that and get the attention of the entire nation on this. And maybe MSM, will get a hold of that. Maybe the media will run with a story like that, because that will sell newspapers. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes. I got 2 points I wanted to mention to you, Dave. I know you mentioned that, they're connecting with the PTSD and they're allowing people to go to the mental health thing. But do you feel that's going to be a piece of the key that, I guess you want to say it, that's going to help it? Because I know in my experience, and many, many others, that the mental health, especially in active duty, if you report to mental health, that can go against you. Oh, I'm insane, or I can't do my job, or whatever the case may be. So a lot of people don't, especially active duty, report to active duty status mental health because of the status that they don't want to be stigma. But then you also have the case where the mental health piece is a situation where, is it really working? Are they just going to say, hey, I went and I'm going because the command told me to go, and it's not really helping me? I've seen, and then they change providers. There's so many, especially within the VA system. I do know that many, many women that I've worked with or have helped, that the VA system itself, that there are so many counselors that go in and go out of the system that they build that trust and then they're gone. So that's why that was one piece of it. But the other piece I wanted to kind of relate, when you talked about closing Fort Hood, I think a temporary major investigation is great, and I believe that would need a closing piece to close Fort Hood. But I also wanted to kind of look at it as there are women veterans groups out there. Like, there is one big group that they are protesting right now in all states. There's a lot of Facebook groups. Board Vanessa Guillen. The senators are overwhelmed because people are reporting things. It's just, and then one of the requests is to shut down Fort Hood because of the suicides. What do they say? 5, 6 at least deaths, suicides, all that stuff in Fort Hood in the last couple months or a year, and that's sad. That's right. Very, very sad.
So we're in closing here. Would you like to have some closing remarks, Keir, on the topic of justice for Vanessa Guillen?
I would, actually. I think that after what happened to soldiers like Lavina Johnson and Vanessa Guillen, to name just a few, I think that I'd like to add that what you said about women, recruiters not recruiting women, and we're having sort of a moratorium on women enlisting, is along the lines of the goals of the female veterans organizations around the country that are organizing to bring justice for both Lavina Johnson and Vanessa Guillen. But what we're asking is that a complete moratorium on enlistment for both male and female soldiers until the investigation is done, until justice is received for Vanessa, because if no one is enlisting, I feel like the United States government will take notice to that, because what they want is they want their men and women going in. They want their force. So if no one enlists, then I think that will send a huge message, because if you're not safe on your own United States soil on a base with the people that you are, like you said, Dave, supposed to trust, I would not want my child going into that military.
Right, exactly. Now, in a minute or so, could you explain to the audience about Lavina Johnson?
Yes. Lavina Johnson served in Balad. She was found dead in her tent with several bruises, burns to her genitalia, and a gunshot wound, and it was ruled a suicide. And her family has never received justice. And this investigation is one of the investigations that I'd like to see reopened, that many of us female investigations would like to see open, when these young women and these young women of color who are even further marginalized within our service are dying on their base, somewhere they're supposed to be safe. So this is a huge problem, and what I would like to see, and I know many of us female veterans would like to see, is justice served so that not one more woman goes into our military and comes out damaged by MST or doesn't come out at all, and that these rapidly rising suicide rates amongst female veterans can come to an end. And that's what I have to say.
Thank you for that. And for closing remarks for you, Lynn?
I think I agree a lot with Kia on most of the remarks. She kind of summed most of it up. I mean, our females, and this goes back decades, unfortunately, with the challenge that we face as females and women veterans in the military. And it's just, and like I say, it's just a sad circumstance that we have to prove who we are and prove that we are as good as males in the military, but also to the point that we should feel safe. We should feel safe to that point. Even as a personal experience, and I won't go into too much of it, I have experienced that MST, and I have experienced the lack of trust. And I would not, if I had an opportunity to educate and help someone through that process, that's what we do to help individuals through it, because nobody should have to go through that.
Right, and I would like to stay on top of this topic with you ladies. Maybe in a few months we could get back together and see if there's any changes have done, any type of, going all the way up to Trump on this one. This seems like something that Trump should get wind of, and hopefully that will happen in the next month or so with protests. I mean, look what happened with the BLM movement, how quick that went up the chain, and now with defunding police, how quick that went up the chain. Maybe this is something that could go up the chain and maybe get his attention, and it could be a talking point for the election 2020. Could be one of the talking points. Well, ladies, thank you so much for spending your time, and your input is just outstanding, and we appreciate all you did for our service. We honor you women in the service. We thank you for your service, for all what you do. Thank you so much, and keep it in the airwaves, Kia, for all you do for your Women Veterans podcast. So, Kia, how can our audience get a hold of your podcast and your social media? Give that your links out right now, if you could.
Absolutely. So the Female Veterans Podcast is on 8 platforms, but most commonly you can find it on iTunes and Spotify and Google Podcasts, as well as theveteranschannel.com, where I also have an upcoming series called Women Warrior Stories, which will be talking to exceptional female veterans and hearing their stories. You can find me on Instagram at the Female Veterans Podcast, as well as Twitter at FemVetPodcast. And I have my season 4 premiering in a few days.
Oh, great. I'm excited. I can't wait to look that stuff up. And yourself, Lynn, would you like to give a plug in for what you're doing for your nonprofit?
Oh, yes, that would be great. And first I want to say thank you, Kia, because me and Kia go way back. I was on her first podcast, and she was amazing. So I understand, and I've seen the transformation of a lot of the females that I work with that gone through her podcast, and they are making some positive transformation to this day. But for the women coordinator, that was one position that you did mention. And I also we started a nonprofit in 2018 and transferred up to Florida because we've seen the culture change here. This is the second to the third highest population, women veterans and just veterans in general that struggle. And when I moved to the state of Florida, it was a very eye opener. And so we created the Hope for Veterans nonprofit. We work with women veterans. We get them through if they have questions on a claim process. We do a women via VSOs available. I was also a VSO. We have a lot of VA questions. But also upon that, we do build what we're doing right now. We're also creating a program, which this, I believe, is going to be a little bit different. There are a couple programs out there that are very similar, but a peer-to-peer program, building that trust, taking these women that might that do have like the background business skills or have some skills to give and want to give back, or to help the struggling women veterans where they need a mentor, they need an advocate, they need someone in their community or close to them on advocating because they're so lost, or they just need someone to build that confidence for them, saying they can do this because their confidence has been shut down with that trust. They've gone through the system maybe a couple times, and the system's failed them. So this is a couple things that are very passionate to me. And I see a lot of positive change. I mean, we've even helped women veterans who are newborn babies with baby equipment just to get them back on their feet. So there's a lot of things going on. But to be able to contact, we do have a website, which is www.hope, H-O-P-E, the number 4, veteran.org. I'm sorry, .org. And then you could also, there are also 2 Facebook groups. One is the Florida DAV Women Veterans. That is all of the state of Florida women veterans. There's a little over 320 women veterans on that site right now throughout the state of Florida. And we also have Hope for Veterans site, which is the nonprofit site, if there's anybody that needs help or if there's anything that we could do, or people broadcast community events and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things that we need to do yet, but it's a good start.
Yes, thank you, ladies. You're woman warriors to me, and I really appreciate what you're doing. And invite me to that Florida conference, the women's conference, okay, Lynn? I tried to do it last year. I was getting close, but I didn't get in. So maybe you'll invite me this year.
They had to reschedule it for this year. So they were looking at doing the next women conference in Naples.
Oh, Naples. Wonderful.
Yep, yes.
All right, audience. Give these women some support out there. Go to their websites. Go to their social media. Support these women warriors. They're doing a great job, and it's needed at this time. So keep up on Justice for Vanessa Guillen. # Justice for Vanessa Guillen. Keep up with the story, and let's keep it in the forefront. And we'll visit you ladies in a few months here on this topic. Thank you again, ladies. You have a great day.